I think we're gonna have, this is gonna be a really interesting session for you guys, with not only talking about broad trends, but really getting into some specifics that I hope will be beneficial for the various brand marketers here. So we are going to get into it. To start, would you each like to introduce yourselves, who you work for, what you do, etc.
Thanks, Rachel. Hey guys, I'm John Vilade. I'm the head of ad sales for Premion. And gosh, Premion has liberated ad-supported streaming for national spot and local advertisers. We work with literally thousands of clients and agencies, bringing in premium ad-supported streaming. We have over 1,000 sellers, which is not a lightweight crew these days, working across every vertical in the industry.
And contrary to what the screen is, my name is Jack Hager and I'm with Audacy, but I do like Roku and anybody can love me just throw a curveball, make sure you're awake before lunch. I'm the VP of Digital Sales and Podcast Partnerships. I'm also the lead on the entertainment vertical for Audacy as well. If you're from LA, you know us as K-Rock, K-Earth, 101 radio stations. We're multi-platform, we're in the events business. We also run a podcast portfolio as well as a stream all of our 235 plus radio stations nationally as well across the Audacy app. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dave Rosner. I'm the CMO of Audigent. Audigent is the leading data activation, curation, and identity platform. Pretty much what that means is over the last 3 years, everybody in this room is buying our data or partners' data that we're working with through the trade desk or your DSPs. We spent the last 3 years figuring out how to bring data into the advertising marketing mix so it's not lagging behind. And now every SSP, every major data company, every DSP is working with us because it's better, faster, all those things.
It is a great platform. So we're going to start with some quick fire questions before getting into some broader trends for each of the panelists based on their expertise. And so the first one's going to go over to Jack. With the rise of podcasts, what can marketers expect as upcoming trends to think about?
Yeah, so podcasts are not just the podcast or the host read anymore. Really, it's kind of a formula, a secret sauce, if you will. In addition to just really captivating and initiating with the host read and the authenticity that you get from the host read, it's got legs now. And so we're looking and tapping into a host social platform. Is there a live event experience that makes sense? Like some of our shows like Fly on the Wall with Dana Carvey and David Spade, we've seen great successes when we take those shows on the road. So opportunity to integrate not only in the podcast from an audio perspective, but also to have a presence on the road or an event space as well. It just resonates a little bit different. When you record a live podcast and then you hear it when you listen to it after you download, there's just a different vibe, different energy. So I think a combination of both social, live events, and then of course, how can we avoid video and YouTube? Most podcasts these days that have a certain level of downloads really do have a video component. It's super important. So and from a trend perspective, you really want to be able to tap into all 3 of those, 4 of those if you can, really to get the most out of podcasts. So we're seeing that growth going in that direction, and it's pretty exciting.
That's really interesting, and I think we all know that events, if you live in LA, are crazy popular, so I'm sure this would be a very favorable city to do those in. So the next one is for you, JP. Another thing that we all know has been changing like crazy over the past years is the TV landscape. So with the rise of streaming services and the decline of traditional TV viewership, what is the state of local in terms of audience and for distribution in the current state of the TV landscape? And also, what strategies should advertisers and media companies adopt to stay relevant and interact with audiences properly?
All right.
There's a lot there. That's why we didn't have it first.
So let me rewind just a couple of years. We're owned by Tegna, and we also have a great partnership with Gray Television. It's 150 television station markets. So in and around the year 2015, 2016, I think we all started to see the trend of local and where it was headed. I'm here to tell you that local is growing, though, and I'm going to explain why. the investment was, how do we move from a very local-based business, right, market by market by market, to an audience-based business and give ourselves the opportunity to aggregate audiences locally, no matter how they're consuming or where they're consuming. So the investment for local now is really about total TV or converged TV or whatever you want to call it. We call it total TV. And local is growing if you include all the streaming viewing that's going on. So at the same time, local needed to start to get the goods that everyone on Madison Avenue had, right? And I said we're a liberator, and I feel good about saying that because we aggregate and simplify a market that, quite frankly, is very difficult to put together. We partner with publishers who love the fact that we have tons of ground troops that can bring new clients and new agencies into the streaming world. And streaming is now very, very accessible. So local's growing in that respect. And also whether, for local has brand issues, local has mid-funnel issues, local has lower funnel issues in terms of transaction. We're starting to bring all those tools as well. So it's not really a Premion story, it's a total TV story for local that we're proud to be leading.
That's great. And I'm sure so much more to come there that we all are constantly staying on top of for TV. So this next one is for you, Dave. So what is something that you believe would be helpful for markets, agencies, and brands to understand that they just may not yet for whatever reason?
Yeah, I always love being at these panels and being the data person after following podcasts and local TV. So now everybody perk up. We're talking about data. We got to the good part. Actually, part of how I think about this was based in a conversation you and I had at Brand Innovators, where you were talking about how important it is at Kimberly-Clark that everyone understands the wiring of how advertising works. So now we're in a completely digital connected world where we want real-time data, but there are different companies that are required across the ecosystem. And if you don't understand how those connections work, things break all the time, and your advertising is not working. It's very simple. The back end is plumbing, and it's very complicated, or wiring, but the front end is very clear. So I'm going to talk about a wiring issue of the internet that is going to affect absolutely everybody in the advertising business, and that's Google's deprecation of the third-party cookie. So, show of hands, has anyone talked about this before? Oh wow! All right, that's a huge jump from the last time. So Google's deprecated 1% of the third-party cookies. Third-party cookie is the element that allows digital ads to understand who the ad is being shown to. Google said that is for privacy reasons they want to phase that out. So 1% is gone, with the rest to be phased out this year. This is having an absolutely massive impact on the ability to actually put ads in front of the right people, and it is going to affect everybody spending money because it's happening on Chrome, which is the largest browser. We've already, at Audigent, so we're very close into this, we're pulling data forward from our publishing partners. We have a code on 2 million websites, mobile sites, and apps in order to create segmentation in this new Google sandbox, which is a new way of transacting. So everybody here, especially I would say at Canvas, needs to be on the front foot of what this change means and experimenting. We just announced with the IAB this first move in the sandbox to bring addressability, or just allow the ability to bring segments back into advertising once it gets thrown away. But now is the time to test, because when things break, it is going to be a massive impact on the efficacy of your spend.
So, for example, it's going to be you got to be on top of this so that you're ensuring if you're doing personalization or DCO that it's coming through properly, that you're reaching your audiences properly. And this really comes into like the diagnostician end and the executing end, that, if you're not focused on it, if you're not really looking at, a lot of things could be going wrong where you're not executing in the intended plan and strategy that you were trying to do. And I think this goes perfectly into the next question. So,
well, I would say one thing that you are going to probably end up taking the brunt of at your company, knowing that you are their programmatic wizard. There are going to be things that are breaking that nobody has thought about, and there have been some organizations that have said, hey, we've read all the documentation, and here's like problems with the SSP integration or all these different steps, So you have to be running your test campaigns because we don't know, and neither does Google, what's breaking. And so as we have this transition that will hopefully get us to a better place, you cannot, if you wait, you'll be a year behind while your competitors are a year ahead.
Totally. I aim for it not to break, but we'll see. So I think this goes perfectly into the next question. So from my perspective, one of the trends that's coming to light that I think is going to be super impactful and also important for everyone is really drilling into the execution and seeing how your execution is set up and utilizing automated dashboarding tools such as Creative X and Advidence to get a light into, are your campaigns set up correctly? Are the foundations there? Because so much can go wrong. You could have this incredible plan, incredible strategy, but then it falls apart on the executing end. And if you're not looking at it, a lot of problems could be happening in so many different ways. That's one of the trends I see as one of the most important ones for 2024 and 2025. But from your guys' experience and perspectives, what do you see as the biggest trend to come into media and marketing landscape for this year and next year? And what do you see as the most interesting trend?
Thank you, Roz. May I call you Roz? All right, so I'm going to defend the sales guys. Yeah, no, please don't touch me. I'm going to defend the sales guys for a minute here too on the data thing before we talk about trends. So I wrote a piece several months ago about co-viewing, and I think that co-viewing has been completely overlooked on the streaming side. You know, we're an industry that's been conditioned to look at VPVH and multiple demos on television, but when it comes to streaming, just because it's served off of an ad server doesn't mean there's not co-viewing going on. A lot of this viewing is going on in the living room. And with regard to trends and other things that we might talk about, co-viewing is driving terrific engagement. In fact, we had a political panel in DC yesterday, and one of the deals there is how, you know, from a trend perspective, slipping into that for a minute, is how streaming is going to affect political. And the living room is the new kitchen. You know, we used to have these conversations at the kitchen table. Now we're having them in the living room, and we're doing a lot of co-viewing. So from a trending perspective, I would say what's trendy is still trending, and that's streaming and the adoption of streaming and consumers voting for fast, free services and trying to mitigate subscriptions. And I think with regard to streaming, and then I'll hand the mic over to you, Jack, we have to look at a couple of different bellwethers this year. One, I think political. Okay, political is going to really have its time to shine in terms of the use of streaming. And the second is the Olympics. I don't even sell the Olympics right now. You know, it would be great to sell the Olympics. But I think we're going to take a look at how sports, live sports, engagement viewing over the 17-day period is really going to perform for streaming. And the 18 to 34-year-olds are about to vote on that. Jack.
Yeah, I'll jump on the data bandwagon too as well. I mean, it's definitely, yes, raise the roof, the data. You know, just taking a step back, I think data is super important now that there's a lot of parallels to where video and podcasting were. Of course, in streaming audio, and just generally over-the-air radio, those analytics are there. From a podcast perspective, definitely data, we lean in with it hard to tell that story just because there's such a big sea of podcasts out there. It's super important. In terms of trends from an execution perspective, a couple things. The first is in just trends in general. I'm going to jump on as well with sports, but I think women's sports, and I've heard that a few times today, there's just a change and it's long overdue, to be honest. So we're really leaning in on where that talent is and what that means to audio, and trying to find the right formula, the right mix from a talent perspective. In the execution part of it, the perfect audio plan would be, you've got, you know, the North Star of, you would execute a national over-the-air campaign and complement that with streaming audio that's led with data and targeting, and then you would get into some post reads. But taking that to the next level, we just announced this last quarter, we partnered with Sounder, who does all the transcriptions for our shows. And what that's allowed us to do is we are able to provide now in the podcasting space, which was generally just a video execution, is provide contextual targeting. on a categorical level. So we see that as kind of the evolution of where PODS is going. It's not just addressable, but from a trend perspective, we really do want to see more advertisers lean in a little bit harder on that contextual targeting front. So again, total evolution of the space, but some good trends ahead of us.
Well, thank you guys for shouting out data. I appreciate that. All right, so trends, what's important and what's interesting.
Yeah.
Important, I'm going to go deeper into programmatic and talk about the trend of curation, which is this idea of pulling data to the supply side at the point of activation, which means you're combining data and inventory in a giant private marketplace so you can see how all your segments are performing immediately and use that to bring down your rates, optimize your campaigns. That was something that was brand new for those of you who missed it 3 years ago and thought you could avoid it. 3 years ago, that was a new idea of how digital advertising could work. Now, every major company has adopted this as their growth market, and a lot of the buy side has brought it forward simply because it works better and it can work with or without cookies, which we talked about.
And this is different than PMPs, though it is what I think most people believe is happening in PMPs. It actually heightens PMPs. I was one of the ideators.
Sadly, we did not, thank you for that. Sadly, we did not find a new acronym because we thought there were too many in digital media.
Like that?
PMP is a private marketplace. Everyone thinks you're calling up your pub and you're just building up a direct private marketplace deal. That is true, but in this definition, what we're doing is taking the same mechanism and putting in thousands of pubs with hundreds or thousands of data segments. So let's say you're a electric car seller, you can find people who have looked for or are actively researching in segments used or new electric cars, take those segments across all kinds of contextual segments in inventory, combine those, which is what computers do really well. So you have an unbelievable number and you let the computers optimize down and then hopefully get an insight. So that's the important one. The interesting one, I think, is the ability to move dollars into purpose-led investment. So the mechanism of programmatic tended to remove your investment in purpose-led or even green initiatives. So we've gotten active in AdNet Zero. Curation allows you to have complete control over who you're buying from and who is in the digital supply chain. So that is a really interesting trend where now people who have either made commitments to purpose-led investment or want to explore greener alternatives to their investment can now take that control and bring it into programmatic where that just wasn't possible a year ago.
And if anyone's looking for a good purpose-led company, Good Loop is a great one out there. CEO Amy Williams, they have some wonderful options for both purpose-led and sustainability. There's a bunch of others out there, but if you're looking for someone, those are all interesting and true trends, in my opinion, for what that's worth. So the next one is, I'm going to start with Dave here, and you guys can answer after for those that want to. But what do you think over the past 0 to 10 years we've forgotten that's making a comeback?
So this is a totally different
change up.
Totally different thing. All right. Let me talk about data. No, we did that. So what I think we're going to see that is coming back, and you and I were just talking about this before the panel, is you're seeing this incredible need to bring the creative and media side of agencies back together. On the programmatic side, as we're doing all these optimizations and getting smarter and smarter about data, we're getting all of these insights, but we aren't necessarily working with the media companies. They don't necessarily have the same relationships with the creative side of the house because there's different agencies to put all these pieces together and ultimately have them work harder for the brand. So this is how we think there's an opportunity. We actually have a chief creative officer, so if we work with independent brands and they want to figure out how to take whatever their messages are and translate it into the programmatic space, that's there because it doesn't matter how smart your targeting is and how great your insights is. If the message you tell somebody when you finally find them isn't very good, it will not give you the right results.
Yeah, fully agree. And, I think as well this is going to be up-leveled into planning, and the people who are doing it great are really just going to get ahead. JB, or would you like to talk towards that
Sure,
question?
great points from Dave. Look, media planning is back in the core artistic and scientific discipline. Media planning has never been harder. I feel badly for those who are in media planning and have to deal with this unbelievably bifurcated media ecosystem. Who do you trust? Where's the fraud? Who actually has what they say they're going to? And we're about to enter into the age of AI informing planning in much, much more meaningful ways. So I think planning is back. It never really left, but it's back in a very, very different way. And probably the most important folks at agencies these days to help sort out this media ecosystem.
To bring it together, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's been so disconnected. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago I was in high school, so I don't know if I can answer this question, but I think that the last few years everything has been really about scale and how much scale you can bring, and that's equally important. But I think getting back to content and really just understanding the importance of content, especially as it relates to the podcast space, while we do want to complement what we do with scale and targetability and utilizing data, it's going back to our roots and making sure that we're focusing in on content and talent that really makes sense that we can invest in, lean in hard, and then catapult their careers a little bit with how do we monetize and capitalize a little bit on all of those different legs that go and offshoots of their just broadcast roots.
Thank you. So, I think to summarize some of that, if anyone in this room has figured out planning and bringing it back together, we're opted in, and you should get on stage next and tell us, what you found. So we're gonna shift into the next question that Jack already started talking towards. So I think we'll start with you here. So the past 7 years has really brought on the age of audience, right? And that's meant a variety of things over the past 7 years. And I started doing audiences as well at eBay advertising, really like when audiences started to come into fruition. It's changed a lot because of so many reasons. The cookie list diminishment, reach, what's working, cost, just overall messaging. There's a lot of things that have changed, but we really are seeing the surge of contextual over the past couple of years. So what do you think is the future of contextual, Jack?
Yeah, I guess I just talked a little bit on the surface of what that means. So the way that we look at it is that it should be always not the centerpiece of your media buy or exactly your general focus of what you're trying to achieve from a KPI perspective, but it certainly should be a tactic that's part of it. And so leaning into contextual targeting, understanding that's really coming from the demand from marketers and wanting to have that extra layer. So like I said, we're invested heavily and leaning hard into that new application from on our podcast platform to make sure that that's a place where marketers can go from an audio perspective.
Great, and JB, over to you.
Yeah, I would just add that, again, audience-based buying, so we are enamored with the notion of creating as many taxonomies as we possibly can for contextual. And connected TV, very good at that. We don't rely on the cookie as much as other parts of the industry do, so there isn't that aspect. And then I would also say that, your creative also provides context. It's kind of a new way to think about it. So how can we push attribution against creative? How can we make creative dynamic in a contextual environment? Super interesting points for us.
One of the things that we're watching at Audigent about contextual is everyone thinks that when the cookie starts breaking, they'll all run to contextual solutions because they work without deterministic or personal information. And what's going to end up happening is the cost of contextual is going to shoot way, way, way up. So what we're seeing and investing in is let's expand how contextual works. I think that's a part one. So let's think about predictive audiences. Let's model the information we have so we can make contextual work harder and also make sure it scales. So all kinds of news on that coming out. The silver lining of this, and I'll go a little bit into the next trend, is that with AI, the ability to bring contextual forward and have deterministic data be something that is just as powerful as, to have probabilistic data be just as good as today's PII. That's what AI will do with contextual because it'll be able to read more signals and say, we can just see what a person's activity is on the internet without having to get into their personal information and get much, much smarter than we are today about who they are and what their propensity is for interest in a brand.
Great, so I'm gonna ask one more question, and then maybe there will be time for one or two questions from the audience. So we just touched on artificial intelligence, which I'm sure has been a big topic for everyone throughout the day and throughout the last 18 months. But how do you foresee emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, but not only automation, machine learning, shaping the future of either media consumption, advertising, planning, whatever it might be of the phases of the campaign and business processes? JB, do you want to start?
Sure.
Yeah, I touched on the planning aspect. I really believe AI is going to bring incredible efficiency to the planning process. And it's just, how do you take that amalgamated data, the data that we're allowed to have, and have it algorithmically processed? It's just super efficient for that. But as a media business, we're looking at script writing, we're looking at news production, we're looking at imagery, we're looking at video production. I just looked over a graduate thesis back at the local university that I live near, and they're doing a completely AI-driven project on the production of rom-com. I can't even imagine, but in 10 years, you can imagine that happening. So it's going to take a prominent place in the business for sure. It won't be without its issues, but it will definitely bring efficiency. I love the ability for it to process massive, massive stacks of big data and granularize it into actionable decision making. So.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that efficiency is probably the buzzword right there when you talk about it. We just partnered with 11 labs, and we're still in the talent, host, read, broadcaster business. So there's a fine line of what that means from us. I think it goes back to efficiency, because we still want to lean into the authenticity of the personality of these voices. It's so important. We see it as a tool that we can actually be a little bit more efficient with our marketers in developing what that host read may be, or an example or a sample of it before they go live. So utilizing the efficiency of AI to create copy or reads or whatever it may be, to get an idea of tonality of what that would sound like within a show, that's super important to us. And then we can lean in on the talent themselves from an execution.
And over to you, Dave.
It's just a build on, I think, from a targeting standpoint, what I was saying before. It's when you start to bring in AI and as it gets more sophisticated and it's too early, and I am a huge proponent of knowing when to put human beings looking at data, and that will always that will for the foreseeable future provide a competitive advantage. But when you're looking at the mechanisms of scale for digital advertising, bringing in AI will immediately make it feel like you have 100 more data analysts on staff, and because you can work through so much of the tonnage, and that is going to unlock more efficiency. My guess is it will unlock efficiency evenly across the industry, so it will be a new cost of entry, not a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah, I love that, and I like I said earlier, I think beyond AI, automation in diagnostician ways is going to be hugely impactful, because similarly, it's going to be able to aggregate a ton of data and spit out these insights that then humans can use. That's much harder for everyone to find. So with that, do we have time for one question? One question. All right, we've scared everyone, and everyone wants food. All right.
The one question will be, what's for lunch?
What's for lunch?
Before we break, thank you everyone.